everybody, Lee Scott here. Thank you for watching and or listening to this week's episode of Leading with Lee. I'm super excited that you're here to talk and listen to this episode as we talk about life, leadership, and legacy. Today I have a very, very, very special guest. But before I introduce her, if you have not done it yet, go onto YouTube and subscribe today to Leading with Lee. And if you have not done it on all podcasting platforms, go and subscribe to Leading with Lee. So my guest today is someone who I have known and our lives have I've been seeing what she's been doing and just kind of been watching what she's been doing, but we went to college together at one point, but she's out here making a big difference. Please welcome to Leading with Lee, Nicole Hopkins. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, Lee.
Oh, I'm so grateful that you said yes, Nicole, to doing this. I'm super excited for this conversation. So first of all, how are you doing? And how have things been going for you?
So I am super nervous because I love your podcast, first of all. I feel like life is oftentimes a jog, but for the past couple months, it seemed like sprint after sprint after sprint after sprint. So I'm looking forward to hopefully jogging in a couple of weeks before I have to run another hard race.
I understand. I totally understand, Nicole. So I did a little research, even though I know you, Nicole. I did a little research. And I'm just going to read off of some of your accomplishments. So we just let people know your credibility. So first and foremost, you are the chair of the National Council of Accounting and Finance Women Alliance. You're a committee member and director for the Tulsa Ballet. You are part on the board for the Greater Tulsa Home Builders Association. You are part of Oklahoma's Next Gen Under 30. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that you're doing and a whole bunch of other things that you are flexing on us with. But like, Nicole, you are out here doing the thing. And that's not even everything that you're doing. Like, I just had to name a few of the things. But Nicole, you were out here doing really well. So just kind of talk to me about, like your background. We went to school together, but I don't know about your background. Mm-hmm. So where did you originally grow up and how has that shaped you and made you the person that you are today?
Yeah, so I will tell you about my background, but first of all, I will say when you read community involvement or achievements or the things we all have to list on LinkedIn, every one of those are a high, and in between every one of them was a significant low.
Yeah.
So I'm giving that disclaimer. As awesome as anyone may seem, it's not all it seems to be. So background wise, I'm from the Tulsa area. I am from a very blue collar family. My dad to this day will go out and weed eat for 14 hours a day. And I have never once heard him complain about having to work.
Wow.
So definitely from a family that worked really hard for everything they have. I grew up in the area. Then I went to Oral Roberts University and pretty excited to be a first generation college grad. ORU was amazing and really formed my character and who I am. And then from there, I have just been working in the corporate world by day and with after school programs and nonprofits by night.
Wow. So, you're still in the nonprofit space. That's funny because I'm going to ask you about that. But I mean, that's great. And, we're going to circle back to something that you said right before this, because I think, Nicole, that's something that I think a lot of young professionals and just people in general have to understand, that our life is a process, right? But I'll ask you about that in a second. I'm going to just move on to my next question for you. So you're currently working for Dewberry, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. And so.
Yeah, and Dewberry is.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. You can go.
No, so Dewberry is a national architecture and engineering firm. I work here in Oklahoma as our director of business development. So basically my job is to see and know people, but to also generate revenue in 3 target industries.
Yeah, we were supposed to talk a few days ago, but you were out trying to get legislation passed.
Yeah, we do some lobbying at the Capitol.
Yeah. I think it's really great, and it's interesting how it highlights your skill set. I find it very interesting because, Nicole, I know you from your work with the Tulsa Hope Academy and how you were
Oh,
engaged and involved in that. You remember me and, oh God, who was it that I used to always go over there with? God, Anna Lynn, yes. Anna Lynn Savato.
oh,
We used to
wow.
always come over there and be engaged with them. And just knowing that is a part of your background, how has that influenced your work? And how has that influenced kind of your career path at this point in what you do every day?
Yeah, so the Zone Academy has influenced every part of my life. I have always worked in the corporate world. So whether I was working at a speakers bureau or a tax resolution law firm or now an architecture firm, I have always been a really strong believer that we are put in the marketplace to build bridges to the nonprofit world, especially for Christians. So it's changed. I feel like prior to working with the Zone, I thought things were black and white. It was this way or it was that way. And the Zone really taught me some things are gray. So I've had a perfect example. I had a student once, I think about this almost every day. And we were at Quick Trip after school. I had to get gas. I always buy these students a snack at Quick Trip if we're there. But before we went into the store, the student said, like, Miss Nicole, will you buy us something to eat? And I immediately said, it's rude to ask. You know, I always cover you, but it's rude to ask. And she said, well, my mom says if I don't ask, I don't eat. And
Wow.
I feel like that's been my whole life in working at
Wow.
the Zone is when you're doing life with people who are different than you start to learn that maybe you were wrong about things. And maybe some of the things that were ingrained in you are how it was ingrained in your community, but not everywhere else.
Yeah, it's interesting, Nicole, because that's one of the things that I think our culture is experiencing right now, right? We're dealing with the power of proximity. Like, I get a better understanding when I have more conversations with you. And I know this has nothing to do with our conversation, but I think it's interesting because even with the work that I'm doing right now with helping the company that I work for engage their diverse members of their staff, it's interesting the stories that they share, right? It breaks that barrier or breaks that mindset that says, well, I don't know about this or I don't know about this. Like, even just you and like, I don't know what it's like to be a woman. I don't know the things that you've experienced in your work life as a woman, in the conversations you've had to navigate through, and how you've had to deal with that. Like, I don't know that. But those experiences and you sharing those experiences give me a better understanding of how I should approach you and engage with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Yeah.
it's I think that's really, really good and such powerful perspective that you had in that process. So kind of staying in that vein, you you have this business life and then you have this nonprofit life. How do you navigate that? Because one thing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but one thing I notice
Mm-hmm.
about the nonprofit world in some ways, and obviously we have a lot of people that do social entrepreneurship now, but it's some people are so driven by purpose that they don't know how to translate those skills into bringing revenue. What are some of the conversations that you have been involved in, or some ways that you have helped organizations really focus in on, hey, we have a mission, we have a goal, but we got to get donors. We got to get the money here to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
So how have you navigated those waters?
So I would say recently in the past year, one of the biggest things I've done is help identify funding sources for those nonprofits. It's nonprofits are doing the best with what they can. And I feel like a lot of times as a community, we give them our scraps instead of really investing in them.
Yeah.
I think of it, if you want equity in a company, you're going to pay for that equity. You're going to have skin in the game. So what about the nonprofits? Is it just going to be an annual donation that doesn't affect you? And I don't think it can be. So
Wow.
I've really taken that approach personally, but also there are things we can do. I don't have $1 million to give to a nonprofit. I don't have half a million, 100,000 to give to a nonprofit. I'm 27.
Right.
But what I do have is the ability to put time and effort into looking. So this past year, we have had a ton of CARES funding in the state of Oklahoma.
Hmm.
And that's something I'm already researching in my job as we're identifying projects. So this is my boss at Dewberry let me do this. He said, figure out the funding, see who we can help. And we were able to help nonprofits in the Tulsa area get about $900,000 in funding.
Wow. That's
So
that's
that sort of thing. So that's how businesses think though. As a business, we're looking for, we do a lot of state, local funding going, so we can identify the projects we can submit on. That stuff exists, and you'll see a lot of your larger nonprofits are already invested in those spheres, and they might have someone on staff who's doing it. So I think that's a big place where we can come in, especially as young professionals or business leaders, is figure out, does my company give annually? Can we do some sort of matching? What can I do to really utilize my whole sphere? Because I recognize by myself I can only do so much.
yeah. I mean that's very very perceptive. So I work for Tulsa Teachers Credit Union, TTCU.
Oh yeah.
Yes, I do. And I'm even seeing in the financial world where they're trying to, even companies like TTCU are trying to figure out how can we have that wing or that arm of our organization to really be impactful in the community. And it's
Mhm.
interesting that we're talking about this because I think that's one of the big um, things in our society and culture. I mean, obviously, generationally, we think this way, right? We're having these generational conversations as millennials and Gen Z about what are the social impacts of companies, right? But I think we're bringing a different conversation to the table, as you just articulated so well, that like we are challenging companies to believe that they actually can create social change. So
Mhm.
there might be people that might be watching this or listening to this and they're asking themselves, okay, so, I see what Nicole is talking about. I understand that she's like, we should push our companies or push the spaces that we're in to be about affecting change in the culture and actually doing something effective. What are your thoughts as it relates to this subject, and how can we as young people, as young professionals, actually bring answers and solutions into those conversations?
Yeah, so I think the best thing young people, at least I can speak for myself and experiences. I think we have to be hands on with people who are living different than us. And that's not just a racial thing, it's an income thing, it's an industry thing, it's a gender thing, it's all these different things. And so um, I recognize when I'm not out at the Zone Academy or I'm away from students for too long, I start becoming a different person.
Yeah.
And I don't like who I become when I am just stuck in my small world. And so that's, I think, a big deal. I recently had a pretty influential decision maker tell me, this was someone I really looked up to. I see them as a change maker. They have real tangible influence. And I shared a little bit of my heart, and they said, as you rise in leadership in your community, you aren't going to have the time to be as hands on. And it
Wow.
was like suddenly everything made sense because I thought, if I'm not hands on, I don't know. So that I think is a pretty big deal. You can't just show up a couple times a year. You've got to really put yourself in those places and spaces.
Right. That's Nicole, that's powerful because it indicates something that has to change in business culture, right? That we can't
Yeah.
assume that like I become less available because I'm not, because I'm doing something different. That's interesting. What is it? And I think that's interesting what you're saying, but how do you think we accomplish that? Because I see you as somebody who has, accomplished that to some degree. And I know we're not perfect and we'll talk about that, but
Mhm.
you try to figure out how to navigate those two spaces and do it efficient enough to where people, you have credibility with people and they're like, oh yeah, Nicole knows what she's doing. So like, in your opinion, what are some ways that that can be fulfilled, and how can that proclivity for people can be pushed in them or grown in them? Because I think that we always pull the time card, you know what I'm saying? We say, oh well, I don't have time for this. Well, how
Mhm.
can we really, really get to a place where we start creating time for stuff like that?
Yeah, so there is a quote by Andy Stanley, and it says, "Do for one what you wish you could do for everyone." And
Mm,
I have really had to wrestle with that. I'm
wow.
the type of person that if you ask me to be involved with your organization or your board or even a volunteer event, I feel so honored that I get to be a part, and I say yes like crazy.
Yeah.
But what I've learned is I'm less effective when I have a lot of yeses. So you can look at my resume, you'll see seasons where I was on 6 boards. I'm not on that now.
Woo.
I'm falling off a couple things, and instead of getting in 6 new places, I have my one thing that I'm focused on, and I'm focusing and giving that my all for the next year.
Yeah.
So it builds less of a resume, but it makes more of an impact. So I think keeping that in mind, just pick one. Yeah.
That's good. First of all, you said build less of a resume, but build impact. Nicole, yes. Yes, 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 yes. There's so much wisdom in saying that because we live in a culture that is so driven by accolades and being so accomplished
Mhm.
and doing all these great things, but so many people are not making the type of impact that they need to make and want to make. Oh, that's so good, Nicole. So for you, how have you used that narrowing of your engagement in things, like being more intentional about being on certain boards? How have you used that to empower others or and open doors for other people?
Oh, yeah. So I am a business developer, which at the end of the day, business developers are responsible for sales. And I have really kind of changed how I think about business development. When I first got into that as a career, I thought I was selling a product. But
Hmm,
what I've really realized is I'm successful in my career when I'm connecting with people based on a why.
yeah,
So I'm involved in American Heart Association. 1 in 4 women in the United States die from heart disease, right? The people I'm involved with at American Heart understand that. We have personal stories that relate to that, and we care about that. So I've met these people in the space of our why, and then that's bled into the space of business.
yeah.
And so I think that's it. If you don't know where to start, find what you believe in, connect to that, connect with those people, impact together.
Oh, that's so good, Nicole. And it's funny. I have written a question down about the American Heart Association. I was like, I think Nicole is involved in it, but I can't remember if you were. But
Yeah.
but yes, that's a great way for people to really
Mhm.
engage and understand why we do what we do every day. I kind of staying there. What is your thought process when you a- approach your work? I think it, if I can just say this, Nicole, I think you have a heart posture towards service and doing it
Mhm.
well and doing it effective. You know, we kind of have some interesting similarities in the sense that the programs that we were a part of at ORU, I am an ORU grad. If
Mhm.
people didn't realize that, I know that. But but I took some ICD classes too, and
Oh
you
yeah.
know things like, I mean, I think you remember took things probably like grant writing or
Mhm.
other courses in that vein. How do you remain or work hard at keeping that posture in all that you do? Because I think that your job title is not, as I listen to you more, Nicole, it's not even job title. It's like you have a posture of, hey, in everything I'm doing, I'm going to serve and actually make people's lives better. How do you work to maintain that, especially as a young professional, and especially as someone who I do believe has the potential to be a CEO, to run companies, to do really significant things? How do you work at remaining in that space?
Well, some days I don't, and some days I get to the end of the day and I think I didn't really love people today,
Yeah.
which is not a fun pill to swallow. But I will say something that I keep top of mind is I have really reached out to mentors and people that are older than me. So many executives. If you just shoot your shot on LinkedIn, I guarantee you people will respond. Some won't, most of them will. So I have really learned, you would be shocked at the things executives will tell you in private. I have talked
Wow.
to people in C suites of Fortune 500 companies who have told me I struggle with my self-worth. And I walk into boardrooms and I still think people are thinking this about me. And so when I'm doing business, I try to remember that you bring your business self, but there's another self behind that that is going through something. You can ask any person any day of the week. In my highest seasons, when I'm being named Oklahoma's 40 under 40, I have something going on that's hurting my heart.
Yep.
And so I try to keep that in mind and connect with people and see them beyond just the business we're talking about. And there are boundaries and things that are appropriate and that aren't. But I will shoot for the heart if I can.
Yeah. I mean, you work with the American Heart Association, so I expect you to fully come with
Yeah.
the heart to go. but
Yeah.
but that's good. There's such wisdom in that, because I think a lot of people are not accustomed to people asking them real questions. We're so accustomed to people just kind of, giving us the, hey, how's business? But not really getting to the heart of the issue or trying to get into the healthy and productive way that we
Yeah.
should engage. What, were you about to say something?
So, and I get it can be weird. So this is just something something I do is I check Facebook and LinkedIn for birthdays, right? And if I know it's someone's birthday, I try to tell them happy birthday. And then when I see them say, hey, how was your birthday?
Yeah.
How was your birthday is a great door in to hear about a joy or a hard time in someone's life. And it's not weirdly saying, how's your heart? Someone you're doing a business deal with.
Yeah, yeah, woo. Listen, I know that lingo, so you can say that to me. But
Yeah, okay, good.
right. But in certain spaces, people don't have the background or the perspective that we have, right? And they don't come from some of the same spaces. So you asking me how's your heart, I'm like, do I have heart disease? Do you
Yeah.
know something that I don't know? Am I sick? but you're right,
Yeah.
Nicole, and I think that's good. And that's actually a very, very, very simple and effective strategy. I never thought about doing that. I got some executives that I need to be in their DMs in the next few weeks.
Oh yeah. Do it. They are,
Yeah,
the Oklahoma community is, which I know people are in other places, and I don't know if it's different, but I know Oklahoma is willing to invest in its young people. Young
yeah,
people are just scared to ask. So ask, just
yeah.
send a message.
Kind of staying right there, because I think there's a lot of fear in that, right? And there's a lot of taxing because of the culture we live in, right? We live in such a taxing culture. I was listening to a friend of mine just recently. He has a podcast also, and he was talking to another mutual friend of ours, and he shared something that I has just stuck with me for a while. He talked about how just social media can be so taxing sometimes. Like
Yeah.
we can become so overwhelmed with, my friend is doing this or they're accomplishing this goal or whatever, and we can only see the snapshots, and that can be taxing to people's heart, and it may cause them to have some fear. Kind of speak to that, because
Yeah.
you might see somebody in the C-suite and be like, well, they're untouchable and I don't know how to engage them because I'm just this entry level employee, or I'm,
Yeah.
you know, kind of mid level. I have some rank, but I don't know how to approach it. What are some other things besides birthdays, or what some things? What are some things more specifically that you think people can do to build themselves up to get the confidence to actually pursue having engagements and relationships with people who have power and influence?
So I just remind myself that we all get up and we put our socks on the same way.
Yeah.
And that is at the end of the day, I think this is like a muscle, right? Reaching out to people, getting rejected sometimes, getting wins other time, that's just a muscle. And the more you practice it, the less the rejection hurts, because I have been left on red. But I think be intentional with how you reach out to people. So something I do is I reach out, I say, hey, I would love to take you to lunch or put 30 minutes on your calendar over Zoom. And the reason I want to do that is because I've noticed X, Y, and Z about you and the impact you've left. And as a young person, I would love to learn from you. And I always give them an out. So I'll say, I know your time is valuable and you're extremely busy. So if now is not a good time, I completely understand. No worries. Um, and so that's just make it clear what you're asking, why you're asking, and give people an out.
Wow, that's so much wisdom in what you just said, and I think that takes the pressure off of them to make a decision right then, right? Oh,
Mhm.
I'm taking
Yeah,
that.
and I've been told it's actually from the feedback I've been given, it can be intimidating even for someone who's in an executive position to get a message of, hey, will you be my mentor?
Yeah.
Because what does that mean? So
Yes.
this is a more low pressure way. And I've had people who I've only met with once. I've had other people who I met with once, and then they said, hey, just when I was starting Dewberry, I met with someone, and as we were finishing up what I thought would be 1 30-minute Zoom, she said, hey, let's meet again in a couple weeks. And
Wow.
then let's meet again in a couple weeks.
Wow.
And so you never know what it will, you won't click with everyone that way, but there will be someone. You're not supposed to do this alone. And you
Right.
need mentors in the workplace just as much as you do in church or in family.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's so much wisdom in that. I was actually interviewing somebody just recently, and I never heard anybody say this, but he said something very similar to what you're saying. We need mentors in areas of our lives.
Mhm.
And I was never taught that. I always thought like mentorship was I get all the information from one person. But
Yeah.
that one person does not have all the resources or even the information that I need, right? And so I
Yeah.
think what you're saying, Nicole, is really, really helpful and really good. So I want to circle back to what we initially started talking about it, and you were saying, how did you navigate some of those lows? I I try to be on leading. I try to be very honest and have conversations with people
Mhm.
about what they're experiencing, what's going on. But all of us, like you said, have a personal story behind the work that we're doing. How have you navigated some of those lows and took some of those experiences and turned it into opportunities to help you move forward in your life?
So that's hard. I There's a quote I cling to, and it's by Mother Teresa, and it says, "What you spend years building, someone can destroy overnight, but build anyways." And I have definitely had moments in my career when
Yeah.
I've walked outside, looked around, and I thought it was over. So for me, I am very connected to my why. That's something I quitting just has never been an option.
Yeah.
And so even when it's hard, I know I have a niece who I'm building a life and a legacy
Yeah.
for. And
Yeah.
I know I have students who deserve better. And so I keep that top of mind. I have a picture on my desk, or I have a Bible verse sitting next to it. Um, and I don't think there's an answer to it. There's this book by Angela Duckworth on grit, and it basically just says they don't know how you develop grit. It's just a thing you have.
Yeah.
So I really don't, just quitting is not an option. You have to get up and keep going.
Yeah. I think that's so good. I'm gonna get to my last few questions because I think you
Oh,
have
awesome.
you have given me so much more to think about as it relates to this subject, and so much in so many spaces how we need to dig into like self-awareness and dealing with our own issues. One thing I think we don't talk enough about among leaders and professionals is that our greatest success is actually not in the stuff that we do, it's actually in who we are. I was literally talking to somebody about that today, that like no matter what goal I accomplish, if I don't do the work of having healthy relationships, having healthy friendships, taking care of myself, like the success that we quote unquote want or have is all for naught because we've put so much investing outside of ourselves that it like
Mhm.
we're not maintaining the health that we need to be successful. So that's all I'm gonna say about that, Nicole. I'm gonna move on.
Yeah.
That's all my comment that I wanted to make. But we're kind of gonna wrap up here. But like, what are some of the things that you are reading? or listening to or engaging in? You told me your answers, but I actually want to hear you talk about those cool
Uh,
things you're involved in.
so I listen to the How I Built This podcast almost every single morning.
Oh,
I like in addition, it's amazing. Have you listened to it?
I've heard about it, but I have not listened to it yet. But I'm going to because
You
you recommended it.
you need to listen, just because the way it causes you to think different. So in addition to Dewberry, I own a corporate gifting company called Blossom Box. And How I Built This is amazing because as an entrepreneur, you hear so many cool strategies, and but you also get to hear how hard people failed, which
Mhm.
on the days when I'm sitting in a corner thinking about quitting, I remember that those people didn't.
Yeah.
So I love How I Built This. A book that I really enjoy is The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson.
Okay.
I It's a really good book. I think some of the best advice in that is that you don't have to change your life overnight. Like if you're in a sales role like me, what if instead of saying you're going to call 100 people a day, what if you just said, I'm going to set a goal and every day I'm going to call 5 people before 9 a.m. So it's that slight edge, just a slight difference. So that's a great book. Um, I Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. I love it. It's all about negotiation, applicable professionally and personally.
That's good. That's good. I think all those suggestions are good, and I'm going to probably look into. Oh, I'm listening to that podcast. Hopefully, I'm gonna reach out
Oh,
to
it's
you.
good.
I'm like Nicole. Yes, I finally listened to it. That was amazing. But I'll let you know when I
Yeah.
listen to it. But so my next question for you, before my last question, is how are you paying it forward? I mean, you obviously, Nicole, your heart
Mhm.
posture is to serve people and help people, and to challenge them in ways to believe that they can be better than they are right now. So how are you paying it forward, and what are some of the things that you're engaged and involved in doing that?
So, as I am kind of transitioning community involvement wise to focus on one thing at a time each year, um, I'm really looking at the succession planning of the things I'm involved with and figuring out how can I bring people who are younger than me
Yeah.
to have seats at the table. So that is one of my biggest things. I love the Accounting and Finance Women's Alliance in Tulsa, and I'm really proud that I am in a past president role there now. President Kelsey Scott, the most amazing person right now. But we last year opened up a spot on our board to a college student, which
Wow, that's
that's
awesome.
a board of people. Yeah, I mean, these people could be employers, but that's something I'm really big about is bringing other people to the table and helping equip them. So when I step out, they don't just feel like they could plan an event, but they feel like they can lead.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah,
probably the biggest thing right now. And just I'm plugged into a lot of different community things and trying to do what I can with what I can, whether it's getting resources for a soccer tournament they have on the weekend, or if it's providing some feedback to someone who's writing a grant for their program.
yeah. That's really good. I mean, I love everything you just said, Nicole, and that's encouraging to me, and it will be encouraging to other people. So my last question for you, Nicole Hopkins,
Oh
is, and I
no.
always think that this is a fun question to ask people. What song would you use to describe yourself, and why?
Yeah, so this is maybe a little too deep for the end. Uh, but Tori Kelly's Question song. I don't
Okay,
know. Have you heard it before?
I might have. I think I've heard a lot of Tori Kelly's music, but I sometimes, you know how we are. We listen to so much music that
Oh
sometimes we're
yeah.
not realizing that, like, oh, I know this song.
Yeah,
Probably
so
go ahead.
I would listen to that song. I would say the older I get, the more I feel like I'm around more suffering and the
Yeah,
more questions develop. Like I have lost students and I don't know why. I've had things happen in my family that I don't know why. But in that song, so she brings up some hard subjects, but then she says, but still we bowed and prayed. And no matter how hard my life has been, I feel like I always return to, but I know he's who he told me he was. I
Yeah.
know I saw him heal that person.
Yeah.
I know God is who he says he is.
Yeah.
Even though our world
Yeah.
doesn't look like it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Nicole, I mean, we could go on a whole tangent on that one, but I'm not going to do that here.
Yeah.
That's real. That's very real. But we'll move on. Nicole, thank you for coming on Leading and sharing your story and sharing your perspective. I think young professionals and just people in general will be impacted by this, to realize that they can move forward, that they can move through difficult stuff and hard stuff and believe that things are possible. So thank you, Nicole, so much for doing this. And I'm super excited for people to see this.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you for watching and or listening to this week's episode of Leading with Lee. If you have not done it yet, subscribe today on YouTube and all podcasting platforms. To get more information about me and what I'm doing, email me at scottconsultations@gmail.com or follow me on social media on Twitter and especially Instagram at Lee A. Scott II or Lee A. Scott II. Thank you for watching this week's episode. I really appreciate it. Much love, and let's get started.